Before I turn things over to our MC for the evening, I'd like to thank Lynn and her wonderful team at New Village Press for being so collaborative. Lynn, please come on up.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I want to thank Ryan and his fabulous team at Poets House. I don't think I've ever had an author event at a venue that was so supportive. I mean, they were here doing the sound check and helping us set up the refreshments, everything. And anyway, we are really well served. And the director of Poets House, Rob, actually came and had a delightful chat with me as well. So I'm super thrilled to be here. I've attended many of Poets House events, but it's really a delight to experience, being a publisher, bringing an author here. So thank you, Poets House. And we're recording tonight's session. So if anyone, for any reason, doesn't want to be recorded in the Q&A section, just be advised that we are recording it for posterity. So I'm really thrilled to be launching Alice's book in New York, which is now the home of New Village Press. We did start in California, and Alice first started her life in the Boston area, and now she lives in Seattle. And we're all constantly shifting humans on different parts of this planet. But I have a great affection now for New York City, and it's really a delight to be able to bring a new poet here to Poets House. Alice is not a new poet, but a poet who has put together her life story, at least the first 45 years of her life, in a really dynamic, free verse that is so unusual. I actually don't know other poets who have done this. It's really quite stunning. And when I read Alice's manuscript, I was really bowled over because the energy just pours off the page of what she experienced and her responses to what she experienced. So many of you may already know Alice, and actually I'm curious, how many of you are here from JVP or perhaps heard about it through their network? Okay, all right. I know we've had some good outreach. And so I first learned of Alice because of her peace activist work. And in fact, she has written a really dynamic essay in a book that came out right before hers called Portraits of Peacemakers, which showcases 50 of the activists that Robert Shetterly has chosen to include in his monumental project called Americans Who Tell the Truth. So Alice was chosen not only as one of the people to be honored as an American who tells the truth for her peace activism, but she was one of very few people who was invited to submit and to write an essay for the book. And it's quite moving. So we brought a few copies of this book that came out right before Alice's also, if you're interested to learn more about her. The portrait that's on the front of her memoir is also from the portrait that's Robert Shetterly painted. So anyway, when I read Alice's manuscript, I had heard she was an OBGYN from Robert Shetterly, but I didn't realize what a pioneer she was in that whole field and what she had to grapple with throughout her medical school training, and then, truly being a groundbreaker of women's health services. And There's also really, first, I'm not sure what proportion of the book, but the beginning of the book is really about her growing up, and that had a lot of deep meaning for me because I'm approximately the same age, and I remember those years of coming of age and what we were dealing with during that time, during this late 60s. So, any rate, it's a real honor for me to introduce Alice. And
so thank you, Lynn, and thank you all for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I am going to, first of all, dedicate this talk to a dear friend named Amy Pett, who 20 years ago said to me, you have to write a memoir. And I said, I'm not writing a memoir. And 20 years later, I did. And she recently died, but she got to know that I wrote this, which was very important. So my memoir traces a number of things that Lynn has outlined. I wanted to explore my maternal lineage, what were the choices for my grandmother, for my mother, what was it like to grow up in the 50s, and then weave my personal life into the context of the history of the time and the politics of the time. And I wanted to explore, why did I become a feminist, and how did I become aware of the critical role of race and class? And this, given the very dangerous times we live in, this book is also a call to action. So it's not a passive book. I want you to read it and then go out and want to fight the battle. Just as a very brief outline, I'm a second generation Jewish immigrant type person, grandparents from Eastern Europe. I grew up in a small town south of Boston, and then in what I call a stable, loving, eclectic family where things were never quite as good as they seemed. And grew up post-World War II, 50s and 60s, and then went to college, medical school, etc. So I'm going to focus a lot on medical school and residency because that's where my feminism was born, and it helped to inform my subsequent practice. So the book is divided into sections of my life, and then it ends with what I call an unadulterated, unapologetic herstory. And the first section of that part is on psychiatry, which was my first love until I went to medical school, and the psychiatrist was giving a lecture and pointed at the few women in the class and told us we were all there because of our unresolved penis envy. And I found that highly problematic. That chapter is all about racism in psychiatry. And then I have a whole chapter on obstetrics and gynecology with a focus on sexism over the last hundreds of years. I suspect that you may be worried about 400 pages of poetry, but I can assure you it's actually very accessible. And the best way to do that is to read some of these poems. And I'm also going to give you a trigger warning because some people come up to me and say, you really got me there. And so just remember to breathe, and that we'll keep holding each other in community. So after a part about my family background, I go into childhood. And this is a little bit about early teenagehood, which is called The Wreck of the Hesperus. The Wreck of the Hesperus and Other Things, 1959, Sharon Junior High School, Sharon, Massachusetts. 7-1A, later called the gifted class, saved my life and wrecked countless others. 1A, to be distinguished from 1B, 1C, all smarties. 7-2A, 2B, 2C, average but not definitely college bound. 7-3A, 3B, 3C, AKA the dumb kids, C needs unmet. The aging Mrs. Langley chortled, we were all too smart to study grammar, hence my lifelong struggle with the pluperfect. Not to mention a certain haziness about the use and abuse of the semicolon. We were assigned to find a poem and memorize it. I wanted something long, hard, and spectacular. I chose The Wreck of the Hesperus by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Every night, I repeated 8 new lines until all 88 rattled easily in my head and off my tongue. The teacher was so smitten with my performance, she made everyone learn. It was the schooner Hesperus that sailed the wintry sea, behold the semicolon, and the skipper had taken his little daughter to bear him company. Made the entire class recite the whole damn poem at assembly. When the dreaded line, The salt sea was frozen on her breast, came looming. The class went silent. No one willing to say the embarrassing, sexually suggestive word, breast. But my eager voice rang, unmistakable, unencumbered, breast, reverberated over my muted classmates, washed across the entire 7th and 8th grade, squirming in the dark auditorium. Perhaps I should have kept my mouth shut. Being a smart, driven, outspoken girl left its own kind of wreckage on the barren shores of my hard-to-endure teenage loneliness. So then the next section is called Battlefield, and so I go to college. I went to Bryn Mawr College, which is a kind of waspy upper class place. And that's where I really had my first uneasy collision with class and race. And this is a poem about graduation from that said college. So it's 1970, and I talk about, all the various things that were going on. And then I say this. I had finally gotten into medical school. All you need is one, waitlisted at 2. I stood on the grassy rolling hills, neatly clipped lawns, stately gray stone buildings, surrounded by a roiling river of smart, accomplished, privileged women. A swarm of bees leaving the nest, the world a deeply uncertain, unwelcoming place. The facts. In 1970, banks could require a woman applying for credit have her husband co-sign. In 1970, employers could legally fire a woman for being pregnant. In 1970, conjugal rights meant that it was legal for a man to rape his wife. US laws included housing discrimination, pay discrimination, jury exclusion for women. A husband had unilateral control of property jointly owned. A woman had half the legal rights of a man, earned 59 cents to the dollar. Help wanted ads in newspapers listed jobs separately for men, just about everything. For women, secretarial, nursing, teaching in 1970. The swarm buzzed and swooped on the cusp of a new world, the frenetic winged flight, blossom to blossom, constructing a life of hard work, stinging when provoked. My class, a murder of crows, swooping out of a pine tree to dive bomb a predator. An avalanche of rock tumbling down a mountain, making a new path. A sisterhood forged in protest, outrage, ambition. 25 years later, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks." So as I said, I did get into medical school by the skin of my teeth, and this is about my first year of medical school. So I go through a whole bunch of things that are going on, and then I say this. And this is 1970 to 72. In microbiology, the slides of organs and diseased tissue projected on the drop-down screen were interspersed with the occasional half-naked Playboy bunny, all boobs and shimmery butts. Many of the guys thought that was funny. The few women and our male accomplices did not. We went to the dean. We explained how demeaning, sexist, objectifying that felt. This apparently was news to him. Can't we take a joke? The dedication in my Williams obstetrics textbook, copyright 1971, read, "To the men of high purpose who have sometimes jeopardized their careers in defense of the right of all children to be well-born, this text is respectfully dedicated." Women apparently were not that important when it came to having babies. The head of obstetrics and gynecology, who actually had a face like a snout, gave the opening lecture. What is a woman? A woman, a man's mother, a man's mistress, a man's competitor, ad nauseum. He used to snort, "The only good uterus is a uterus on the table, ah ha 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 ha." Provoked, we women rallied outside his lectures with signs and charts, outraged and disheartened. We had one session on lesbianism, sat in a darkened auditorium, watched a film about two women romping through fields of flowers, holding hands, eyeing each other seductively, gently, passionately making love. This was supposed to desensitize us being white, hetero, male. The second film on gay men was all bump and grind, erect penises and muscles sweaty in the heat of the moment, very little else. Some men in the class started retching, racing for the doors to vomit. I don't remember any discussion afterwards. The American Psychiatry Association removed homosexuality as a psychiatric disorder in 1973. Not soon enough. When the drug company Eli Lilly gave each medical student a free stethoscope so we would have warm, fuzzy feelings towards the pharmaceutical industry, along with free dinners and other goodies, we sent our stethoscopes to a medical group in North Vietnam to protest the US war effort in solidarity with the napalmed and the maimed. We wrote a letter of thanks to the drug company, which was published in our local Boston newspaper. Second year, when I came close to failing, the dean called me into his office for a chat. What's going on? Is there a problem? How could I tell him I was drowning in rage with a good dose of depression and alienated despair? So in trying to figure this out, I turned to consciousness-raising groups. So this is a poem called Consciousness Raising. 1970 to 1971, various kitchens, living rooms, bedrooms in the Boston area. College grads, just sorting things out in a world made for men, after the wild competitive scramble to get into medical school. We were a flock of mismatched birds, flapping as fast as we could, soaring too close to the sun, dive-bombed by birds of prey. Disoriented, without a compass or patterns in the stars or the pull of the magnetic field. We swooped, fluttered, nested, gabbed over hot tea and mulled white cider, spiked with too much red wine, confessed our bewilderment, whispered our outrage, plotted our revenge. The search for sisters led us to women marching in the streets, writing self-help books, our bodies ourselves, plastic speculums, flashlights shedding light on the mysteries deep inside. We searched for new vocabulary, a radical politic to guide our way. Feminism, autonomy, health, a human right, patriarchy and privilege, the avarice of capitalism, the meaning of consent, the objectification and commodification of our bodies. The magnetic field tugged, stars shimmered. We noted the terrain and topography, established our migratory flyways. A medical student or adult woman patient is not a girl ever. Do not trust anyone who says, "Don't worry your pretty little head about that." Or, "Women are so emotional, here's a Valium for your PMS, headache, depression, anger." Pick your fights. Find your allies. Honor your cervix. You know your body better than any doctor. Listen to it. Use those wings. The index of our obstetrics textbook had a subversive entry, male chauvinism. A secretary added that phrase and listed all the pages of the book. Your uterus is the size of a fist for good reason. So then I was having, a major life crisis when I realized I didn't want to be a psychiatrist, and I was trying out all the different careers I could have, and this is a poem about career choice. So I go through various careers, and then I get to this. And this is 1972 to 74. I watched my classmates find mentors, fall in love with a field, an organ, a path, a life. I asked myself, as a feminist and a woman, where would I make the most impact? Not the usual question. The answer, as a feminist and a woman, was painfully obvious. The field that felt most backward, most important for women, most in need of big-time radical surgery at the hands of an angry, ambitious lady doctor, obstetrics and gynecology. I debated, struggled with my sisters, circles of consciousness raising late into the night. Could I survive 5 years of training, years of surgical instruction, attitudes that made me crazy, no mentor, a life of disrupted nights, hours treating routine birth control, vaginal infections, menopausal hot flashes, interrupted by life-threatening ruptured ectopic pregnancies and mad rushes to the operating room? Could I give my life to that? Perhaps in honor of the brother I couldn't save when I was 3, close that primal wound, devote myself to women filled with babies who needed to be safely accompanied into this world. That is where I wanted to be. For all those reasons, I packed my dynamite, filled out my application, readied for battle. So it turns out when you're in medical school, you also have to learn how to be a doctor. So this is a poem about physical exam. 1972, Boston University School of Medicine, Boston, Massachusetts. Male students stripped to the waist, breaking the boundaries between social touch and medical touch. Usually, students do not take their clothes off during class. Usually, we do not touch each other's naked bodies in class anyway. Chest smooth, pale, freckled, skinny, bulgy, bear-like, nervous laughter. I tentatively applied my shiny, cold stethoscope, feeling all serious and professional. Listened carefully for the thump, 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 thump. Not sure where to put my other hand, hunted for murmurs, arrhythmias. They wouldn't let the women strip because of, our breasts. The class learned that on a plastic, not at all like the real thing model we called Betty the Boob. And then I go through some other organ systems and then I say, the pelvic exam was a frightful combination of dismay, discomfort, curiosity. The models, prostitutes. Who else would be willing to have a clutch of shaky, sweaty, gloved hands poke and prod that private place again and again for a price? The woman spread her legs silently, an anonymous crotch. That did not feel right. I wanted to say to all the men in my class, but didn't, this woman is a person. When you do a pelvic exam, imagine yourself buck naked, legs in cold metal stirrups, your jewels hanging limply in the cool office air, a gloved hand poking, prodding, squeezing your balls, judging, telling you to breathe normally. Just imagine that. Biffed and buffed, in a starched white coat, my name pinned to my front pocket, real doctor-like, a respectable dress, sensible shoes, wild hair corralled in a bun, my face framed by the most demure of my hippie earrings. I drove to Chelsea Naval Hospital to see my first practice patient. The institution, all male docs, male nurses, male patients, and me. I spent hours writing out all my history and physical exam questions on white file cards, a clipboard ready to record the answers. Cloaked in nervous anticipation, stethoscope casually draped around my neck, clutching a shiny black pretend alligator skin doctor's bag, gift from a pharmaceutical company, I arrived at the nurse's station, took the card with the patient's name, sailed down the open ward as if I had done this 1,000 times before. I pulled the curtain around my assignment, an unconscious, jaundiced male with skinny legs and a massive belly. Overwhelming relief. I knew his diagnosis, hepatic encephalopathy. Translation: severe, probably alcoholic, cirrhosis of the liver, leading to a deluge of toxins that affected his brain. Translation: I didn't have to talk with him. I leaned my file cards up against his still body, tenting the sheets, started my exam, beginning at the top of his pale, yellowed head. My second practice patient was a strapping, muscular, crew-cut Navy man, probably my age. I had my shield of file cards and clipboard and was doing a respectable job of appearing to be a thorough, unusually obsessive doctor, until I got to the hernia exam. I hadn't quite figured out the technicalities of that, how to reach down and stick my finger into the sides of his testicles. Do I face him, stand behind him, lift up the gown? Somehow, in my flurry of incompetence, I ended up on my knees facing him, and he was stark naked. When I asked him to cough, his penis bounced in my face. I wasn't sure which one of us was going to die first. So I did much of my fourth year in my internship in Lincoln Hospital in the South Bronx, shortly after the young lords had taken over the hospital. So I wanted to read something about Lincoln Hospital. Let me be sure I'm on the right page. Okay. To be of use, 1973 to 1975, Bronx, New York. Lincoln Hospital survived as a last stop before death, resuscitated by an affiliation with Einstein College of Medicine, where house staff trained on the poor dreamt of moving on to care for real patients, paying middle-class white, in private offices in cities and suburbs. As the hospital sank into negligent obscurity, the interns and residents trended brown, increasingly from Philippines, India, Pakistan, Taiwan. Decent, hardworking, foreign medical graduates, unacculturated to the wants and needs of the American South gone north, and island people surviving the streets of New York. Taken down by alcoholism, heroin addiction, the spilling of blood by well-armed gangs, police aggression, pulled in disparate directions by church leaders, pimps, local bosses, the Black Panthers, and young lords. There were angry takeovers, demands for a people's program, a community-run methadone treatment with a good dose of anti-colonial, anti-capitalist political education and acupuncture. There were upheavals, sit-ins, arrests, a painted bedsheet flapping from the 6th floor, hanging over the expressway, seize the hospital to serve the people. A call went out for house staff with a socially and politically conscious orientation to come train in the service of the community, to challenge hierarchy and authority, old ways of thinking. The collective formed doctors, nurses, mental health workers, young lords with berets and power handshakes, in a heady, messy, uneasy, fractious coalition, ready to make revolution, full of idealism, burdened by a 100-hour work week and very sick patients. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be useful on the front lines in the grit of medicine and poverty, working for the neglected and forgotten, a transformative challenge to the past. And medical school is also a profoundly radicalizing experience, and this is an example. So I was doing my fourth year, a lot of it in New York. So this was actually at Brookdale Hospital in Brooklyn, New York in 1974, and the poem is called See No Evil. The woman sat up in bed, rocking, groaning, fathers still not allowed in labor and delivery, her chestnut hair matted, rubbing her swollen belly, hut-hooing herself to full cervical dilatation, bathed in the earthy sense of blood and amniotic fluid. I was so excited to see a mother doing natural childbirth, focused, breathing, in touch with the rhythms of labor. She had taken all the classes. She wanted to have her baby her way. She was in control of a totally out of control moment, birthing being wildly primordial. When she pushed with all her fierceness, I felt the magnificent power of her body, a primal, life-giving force, womb goddess-like, channeling the women who labored and birthed before her. I was awestruck. As the baby's head began to crown, my heart quickened. The anesthesiologist snapped a mask over her face. Take the edge off, dear. Her obstetrician whipped out his forceps, cut a huge episiotomy opening her vagina, slipped the forceps over the baby's head, and dragged it out the last inch of the birth canal, robbing her. The doc turned to me, eyes like darts over his mask. Oh, he held his hands over his ears. You didn't hear that. His eyes, you didn't see that. His mouth, you will keep silent. His crotch, you will not say what I did. Got it? So then I go into obstetrics and gynecology, and this is the first day of my residency. Modern delivery, 1975, Beth Israel Hospital, Boston, Massachusetts. What I learned the first week of my residency on the night obstetrics rotation, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., 6 nights a week. When a woman arrives in labor, get the IV started quickly. Translation: labor is a dangerous, life-threatening, unpredictable process. She could bleed to death or seize or die or otherwise be endangered. We need to be ready for everything and anything always. Order the enema. If she's not in active labor, wink at the nurse, a triple H. Translation: high, hot, and hell of a lot. That'll get her going. Order the poodle prep, a weird shave of the lower half of the pubic hair, leaving a tuft at the top. This was supposed to be an improvement over the old practice of a full shave. Translation: pubic hair, ooh, I'm suturing here. When the head is about to crown, but not too soon because you will tie up the delivery room, but not too late because the baby will arrive in the hall with everyone watching and yelling. Rush to the delivery room, get the woman to scoot over from her bed onto a hard, narrow delivery table, which still has leather straps hanging from the sides. Remember twilight sleep? While the lady is having contractions and an intense impulse to push, and the nurse is urging blow, 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 arrange the woman flat on her back, legs dangling in stirrups, a bright surgical light aimed at the area of interest, everyone around her scrubbed, gowned, masked, as if for major heart surgery. Translation: the most important thing at this point is that the OB can see his sort of sterile field and do whatever it is he plans to do. Scrub the lady's bottom with betadine and drape with sterile sheets. Translation: a woman's vagina and vulva are a dirty, hairy, dangerous place, especially for an obstetrician. Cut a generous episiotomy. Translation: a woman's vagina and pelvic floor are pressing on the vulnerable baby's head, not built quite right for the job. It's a miracle anyone survived birth before we came along and improved everything. And this is another day in the life of being a resident. The thing is, 1975, Beth Israel Hospital, Boston, Massachusetts. The thing is, he was a prominent doctor, famous man, leader in the field, and I was just a first-year resident, learning how to do colposcopy, which is like looking at the cervix, vulva, vagina through binoculars. The thing is, when he stared inside that woman and I held her hand because I was just learning, and when he said with the speculum inside, the cold metal holding her open, well, it looks like cervical cancer, my eyes met her wide open, frightened eyes, and I squeezed her hand and thought silently, because I was only a small, insignificant resident, this is not how you tell a beautiful, whole, thinking, feeling woman who is more than just her cervix that she has cancer. This is not the right way to do that. The thing is, when the faculty and residents and wives were at his house, chatting and nibbling fancy cheese and fancy cakes and balancing little china plates and saucers without spilling, and he snapped at his wife because she doesn't even know how to make a good cup of coffee, and I saw the humiliation in her eyes, but I was just a small, insignificant resident, so all I could do was to share her humiliation in my heart and think, this is not how you treat the woman, whether or not she makes a good cup of coffee. You could make it yourself, goddammit, if you have so many opinions about fucking coffee. The woman who has stuck by your side and washed your underwear and made your bed and raised your children and put all those little delicacies in circles on that expensive china. This is just not the right way to do that. So I made it through all my training and opened a practice with some friends, a woman and her husband, called Urban Woman and Child. So this is a poem called Having It All. 1979 to 1988, Urban Woman and Child Health, Inc., Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts. An urban practice located on the first floor of an apartment building for senior citizens. A trolley rattled by, past a gas station, a funeral home, drugstore, pizza parlor on the corner. A nonprofit with a community board. We were finally in control of our lives, we thought. in control of how we practiced medicine. No men at the hospital offered us jobs in their upscale practices. Women partners were not considered a selling point yet. Plus, they thought we were too much trouble, perhaps a threat. 2 women obstetricians, a pediatrician, midwives, nurse practitioners, a private office, 3 health centers. We tried to serve everyone and loved it. Insured, Medicaid, Medicare, self-pay, sliding scale, no pay, barter. Health centers paid $24 an hour. Medicaid, $4 a prenatal visit. Private patients subsidized everybody. We struggled to cover our costs, our own meager salaries. 2 pediatricians joined us. It was hard to hire other obstetricians, the pay too low, the call too much. 2 health centers ultimately went bankrupt, another big no pay. The waiting room quickly filled with the local Black and Hispanic families, white working class folks, Cambridge feminists from across the Charles River, suburban white ladies looking for lady doctors living in Wellesley and Newton, yuppies, young urban professionals, the vanguard of gentrification, lesbians, folks with cerebral palsy, paraplegia, avoiding pregnancy, pregnant, menopausal, everything in between. Opening day, the toilet overflowed. I scrubbed the floor myself. One night when the electricity blinked, refrigerator failed, the pediatrician raced over to rescue our vaccines from oblivion. Appointment times were generous. In the beginning, every woman was given a copy of Our Bodies, Ourselves, the Bible of the feminist movement. We were committed to supporting, educating, healing in its broadest sense. Our cheerful, frenetic office manager had a psychotic break. Her desk filled with unpaid bills. We discovered when our beepers stopped working. She never got through sending out patients' bills either. Free care from R to Z. We were very popular, the only all-woman OBGYN practice in the Boston area, working directly with pediatricians. We catch them and toss them to you. We taught classes, offered backup for home births, which were shunned and belittled by the mainstream establishment, spent long hours in the hospitals supporting women in labor, thrilling, exhausting, sisterly work, not cost-effective from a business point of view. Patients loved the midwives. The hospital refused to give them privileges in labor and delivery until the month we closed 8 years later. When the baby's head crowned, one of us docs would rush in, discreetly hide behind the curtain, while the midwife attended the delivery. The doctor sent the bill and signed the birth certificate. We were mostly young women, professionals and staff, supporting our own pregnancies, parenting, a 3-month maternity leave, a very radical policy. At meetings, someone was always pumping, spraying warm milk from overflowing congested breasts. Over 8 years, we had 10 babies. That was just the docs and the nurse practitioner. The hospital staff, our former mentors and supposed friends, refused to help with maternity coverage, not part of the old boys network. I was told our patients were too challenging. Translation, poor, needy, outspoken, knowledgeable. OBGYN malpractice skyrocketed to $85,000 per year per obstetrician. That was the reduced rate for Harvard docs. We always said we would close when our malpractice was more than our salaries. As usual, we had no role models. We defined our priorities as doctors and working mothers, admitted our fears, self-doubts, supported each other, mourned together. I played doctor, surgeon, psychiatrist, social worker, office manager, plumber, colleague, mother, wife. I was having it all. Our patients gave us a huge goodbye party at Lars Anderson Park. I still remember the photo, surrounded by piles of goofy, smiling kids, our babies. So after you've been in practice for a while, you have the privilege of taking oral boards to become a fellow in the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So this is Oral Boards, 1981, a fancy hotel, Chicago, Illinois. Fortified with coffee and Imodium, my deranged gut seething with anxiety, I wait in a sea of anxious men in a much too small room for my name to be called. Dark suits everywhere. I obsessed over the critical female question. what to wear. Demure but intelligent, but not too threatening. White blouse with curved collar, ladylike thin red scarf, gray wool jacket, blue skirt, leg shaved, pumps, small stud earrings, a dab of lipstick, loopy curls tucked in a bun. A cross between librarian and missionary. We each are led down corridors like rats in a maze to our own test sites. An ordinary hotel room where I face a microscope, a pile of pathology slides. Name the organ and the disease process. This section will end in 60 minutes. I stare at the inviting double bed, the small square radio, force myself to focus, focus, focus. An hour later, a famous professor clicks open the door. He brings a slide projector with medical histories, electronic fetal monitor tracings, x-rays, clinical dilemmas. He can ask me anything. I want to ask him, do you remember that I was the first woman accepted to your residency program in the history of the universe, and I turned you down? Focus, focus, focus. An hour later, two rotund, congenial Southern gentlemen review my case list. Every surgery I have done for the past year. I am a surgeon, after all. My successes and complications. They can ask me anything. They do. Do you plan to marry? Do you plan to have children? Will you be able to practice medicine? Ding, ding, ding. Brain racing. I could sue the pants off of you, which would not be pretty. I smile demurely, formulate my strategy like a general in the throes of battle. Oh no, I nod sweetly. I plan to devote my life to medicine. I am a nun in the service of the goddess of the uterus. I document everything. Months later, when I am officially accepted as a fellow in the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, I lodge my complaint. The official letter of apology comes quickly. They know I could sue the pants off of all of them. The other thing that's very powerful about being a young woman and going through life with your patients all being the same age is you get to have experiences together. And this is a poem called Down's Baby. June 1983, Beth Israel Hospital. She draped her leg over my swollen belly, the only way I could get close enough to deliver her baby. I was due any minute. Her husband stood on the other side, holding her as she pushed. She had a dream pregnancy, amazing labor. I felt excited, almost envious. After the head emerged, I wrapped her hands around the baby's shoulders. Together, we lifted the boy onto her belly. Mother and father curled around their child, weeping with relief and joy. I looked, knew at once. Broad forehead, almond-shaped eyes, flattened bridge of the nose. The nurse knew too. Down syndrome, trisomy 21, intellectually disabled. This was before routine prenatal screening, blood tests, ultrasounds. I called in the pediatrician, a wise, gentle soul. He explained that the baby was beautiful, had well-formed arms, chunky little legs, 10 toes, 10 fingers, a perfectly formed belly, a strong heartbeat, a very kissable baby. The parents glowed and cooed, and probably Down syndrome. Silence. The father recoiled, shocked, never touched his son again. The mother wrapped herself around her infant and cried. The next morning, I waddled into their room. The mother-in-law lunged at me, screaming,